Hey, greetings everyone, it's GleeCon, and we are back in business again. Bringing you another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On the last episode, we had a first for the show, which is where we didn't accomplish a god diddly dang thing. Maybe it's not a first. Maybe we've had some travel episodes. But all you did was join me for half a level of grind. And I'm sorry, I had planned a fifth episode. I delivered a fifth episode, but we got no real quests done in it, so it was kind of just an episode for the sake of an episode. So instead we diverted and we had a little conversation of the kind of thing that goes on in my mind a lot, which is rankings and tabulating. In this case, I ranked the classes by soloing PvE type stuff. I ranked them from that. So yeah, listen if you want to have an hour-long conversation on that, and feel free to hop in the comments if you want to contribute to the discussion. We've also been reading War of the Scaleborn, and we had a really cool chapter last time where the battle was underway. Varanoth almost got caught by Neltharion, and yeah, it's really full pitch. You're seeing the war. You see what the Order Dragons want to accomplish. You kind of know if you've played Dragonflight where this is heading, and it's really a matter of can we see how it gets there in the meantime. I finally finished all the Dragonflight material and finished the raids and everything, so I am just wrapping up now. Well, now I'm finally going to be starting, probably this weekend or tomorrow or something, doing the new content that just recently came out, like the Worgen storyline. So I'm a little behind because I do so much other stuff when it comes to this game. I spend so much time in Classic and making the shows, and also my side project where I'm setting us up for a much smoother experience when we do Wrath of the Lich King. So anyway, let's dive back into this book, War of the Scaleborn, with chapter 19. Stay a while and listen. Neltharion cursed his failure to capture Varanoth. Had he succeeded, he would have dealt a crushing blow to the Primalists' campaign in the north. Instead, the Primalists returned the next day, seeking to win a Talonhold in the Broodlands. The black, red, and green dragonflights rebuffed them. They attacked at dawn of the third day, undeterred, and again on the fourth day. 10 times the number of Primalists fell from the skies as did dragons from the Aspect's forces. Still they raged on. Alexstrasza's Reds flew in to provide support in the Reach, bringing reinforcements to flagging defenders and healing magics to the wounded. Varanoth's tactics grew cleverer with each encounter, testing Neltharion's strategies, seeking to whittle down the Black Dragonflight's strength. The Earth Warder could not tell if Varanoth had improved as a commander or if Iridikron influenced her approach. The Frozen Heart used her greater numbers to devastating effect. Still, the Primalists struggled to capture even a wing length of the Reach. With each passing day, the Incarnate's grand strategy grew clearer to Neltharion. They meant to seize the territories directly north and south of the Obsidian Citadel, catching it in a pincer attack. In the Reach, Razageth was a secondary objective, for if the Citadel fell, the whole of the Waking Shores would fall too. On the sixth day, Varanoth pulled the Reach's many rivers into the skies, using them to create a great glacier that punched through the mountains south of the Skara Vaults. Neltharion commanded his forces to fall back, for the Frozen Heart and her allies drew immense strength from the thick ice. It would spread slowly until it engulfed all the Reach. Concerned, Neltharion asked Alexstrasza to assemble the Aspects at the seat of the evening of the sixth day. The mood was somber. The Dragon Queen fretted over the campaign map, speaking in low tones to Nosdormu. Malygos sat opposite them, appearing more hale than he had in decades. Arcane fire sparked from his eyes when he saw Neltharion stride into the seat. Ysera drooped like a withering flower beside the Spellweaver, having spent the last 6 days keeping Fyrakk at bay. Black bubbly burns charred the left side of her neck and shoulder, the wounds packed with glowing peat moss. Butterflies danced along the moss, emanating glittering magic into the wound. Ysera's greens and the black dragonflight's iron scales had kept Fyrakk from setting fire to the plains, but Fyrakk was much less circumspect than Varanoth. He aimed to spread as much pain, terror, and fear among the dragonflights as possible. Malygos chuckled as Neltharion took a seat beside the Dragon Queen. "Late to your own meeting, I see," the blue aspect said. Would you like me to come out of your stuffy libraries and fight Viranoth on the front lines with me? Or would you like to come out? Neltharion replied. The Spellweaver wrinkled his snout and shook his head. That's what I thought, Neltharion said with a snort. He turned to the green aspect. How fare you, Ysera? Garyon tells me the fighting at Stonefrey has been fierce. The dreamer yawned, then gave her head a little shake. Well enough, though I would appreciate if we could keep this short. Fyrakk's thirst for battle is nigh unto unquenchable. He is the first on the battlefield and the last to retreat. Then, with Alexstrasza's permission, I'll take the floor, Neltharion said. It is yours, the Dragon Queen said with a wave of one forefoot, still mulling over the pawns placed along the Broodlands border. After careful consideration, Neltharion began, I believe Iridikron's strategy is to catch the Obsidian Citadel in a pincer movement, or perhaps in a three-way siege. That is why Viranoth and Fyrakk are fighting on separate fronts. They mean to capture the territories directly north and south of the Citadel, then attack the fortresses one. The Reach and the northern section of the Emerald Plains lit up on the war map as the Earth Warder mentioned them. The golden light hugged the Obsidian Citadel, almost swallowing the stronghold in its brilliance. Alexstrasza narrowed her eyes. That does appear to be a possibility. The Citadel cannot fall. If it does, the ruby life pools will be defenseless, and it would give the Incarnates a fine position to strike at Valdrakken. What are your suggestions, Neltharion? We focus our considerable talents on removing one Incarnate from the field immediately, Neltharion replied. Viranoth is too canny. It will take time to find a way to capture her. Fyrakk, on the other hand, is as smart as a clutch of rocks, Malygos said, which prompted an uncharacteristic snort from Ysera. Precisely, Neltharion said. Nosdormu drummed his talons on the ground. In many timelines, Fyrakk is the first or second to fall. There is no reason that can't happen in the one true timeline as well. Alexstrasza cocked her head, making the dangling gems on her horns swing. I assume you have a plan, she asked, her gaze flicking to the Earth Warder. I do, Neltharion sighed. Well, at least part of a plan. I fear you will not like it, Ysera. The green aspect flared her nostrils. Why is that? I want you to give him Stonefrey Falls, Neltharion said. Ysera recoiled. Alexstrasza's gaze snapped to him, questioning. Are you mad? Ysera said with a half-gasp. We lost 40 good dragons from the green and black dragonflights at Stonefrey. I know, Neltharion replied. I need Fyrakk to think he's winning. We give him Stonefrey and have the green dragonflight fall back to defend the plains. Neltharion moved the green dragonflight to the river near Stonefrey Falls, then slid the earthen bulwark's 5 pawns into the apex canopy. Leverian and his battalion will taunt Fyrakk and engage his forces here at the canopy, with instructions to slowly fall back to the Citadel. We can use our mortal allies positioned in the canyons to thin the Primalist numbers as they approach. Malygos frowned. And what makes you think Fyrakk will follow your forces into the waking shores? That may be counter to the Stone-Scale's orders, and even Fyrakk won't be unwise enough to defy Iridikron. Neltharion smiled and slid Alexstrasza's ruby pawn onto the Citadel's ramparts. The light gleamed off the pawn's sharp, precise facets. Malygos' eyes widened. Fyrakk does hate the Dragon Queen. No, Nosdormu said as Ysera cried out. Under no circumstances can we ever risk Alexstrasza's life, especially as bait. Alexstrasza shifted her weight but said nothing, her gaze fixed upon her ruby pawn. With any luck, Neltharion replied, Alexstrasza won't need to engage Fyrakk. I'd rather not rely on luck. Malygos made a rumbling noise in his throat, plucking his pawn from Vakthros and considering it. He turned the sapphire piece this way and that, letting it catch the light, then levitated it into a whirl of arcane fire. The blue aspect smiled, flashing fangs. Perhaps I shall leave my stuffy libraries after all, he said to the Earth Warder. It seems you will need my help. Malygos' pawn disintegrated, reappearing on the map of the Obsidian Citadel in a flash of blue light. Neltharion looked up at the blue aspect and grinned. 3 days after Fyrakk and his armies established a Talon hold at Stonefray Falls, he received a curious message from Viranoth. "Be careful, Fyrakk," the Frozen Heart said via a messenger. "The Aspects may be trying to capture us." Fyrakk thanked Viranoth's messenger, but he laughed as he did so. The old Ice Incarnate tended to be as paranoid as Iridikron himself. Fyrakk would die before he allowed the Aspects to capture him as they did Raszageth. He was not so weak. In the aftermath of Fyrakk's victory at Stonefray Falls, Neltharion sent the Earthen Bulwark to the Apex Canopy to harry the Primalists. Alexstrasza now had command of the Citadel, where she led a combined host of Ruby Flamebringers, Onyx Reavers, and Obsidian Guard, and several battalions of Draconid. Fyrakk was intrigued by the news. If he could smash through the Earthen Bulwark, he could challenge the Dragon Queen at the Citadel. For centuries, Fyrakk had looked forward to facing his cousin in battle. He wanted to raise her stone monstrosities that twisted the land to the Titan's whims, to wipe the righteous smirk off her Titan-sculpted face, and to listen to her last gurgling breath as he crushed her windpipe like a wet reed. When they were young, he had taught her how to hunt and fight. The Force One needed to snap bone or tear flesh. If Alexstrasza was worth anything in the air, it was because of him. He knew her every move, her every weakness, and he knew he was the better fighter. Alexstrasza would give him the fight he so craved. Since becoming an incarnate, Fyrakk had found no other dragons to satiate his bloodlust. They were all too weak or timid to threaten him. Fyrakk had grown bored, even with the promise of war. None of the Ordered could match him in the skies. He had even left scores in Ysera's hide. Now he could see a path to an actual challenge. All Fyrakk wanted was Alexstrasza, dead by his own talons. Killing the Dragon Queen would scatter the flights. Fyrakk could win the war in one battle, then spend the remainder of his days hunting the Order down to the last. It sounded delightful. Fyrakk considered waiting for the word from Iridikron, but he did not need the stone scale to chart his course like a whelp. Besides, was Iridikron at the Battle of Dragonblight? No. Was he at Frostfire Chasm? No. What about Icewing Rift? No. The victory at Icewing Rift was Viranoth's, but she would not have won without Fyrakk's timely intervention. Speaking of the Frozen Heart, he wasn't about to tell her his plan. She was already Iridikron's favorite, and the last thing Fyrakk wanted was for her to come in and steal his glory. So he instructed his Magma Talons to prepare for a night attack. As the sun fell, Fyrakk roosted on a tall, lonely peak on the edge of the Emerald Plains, looking toward the Citadel. Excitement bristled in his belly, making him feel as though he had swallowed a hive of angry wasps. Every so often he twitched, barely able to contain himself. "Mighty Incarnate," Zarian, one of Fyrakk's wing leaders, landed at the Blazing One's side in a rush of hot wind. "The Citadel lies quiet, and the majority of the patrols are on the ground. Even the Earthen Bulwark appears to have bedded down for the night." Fyrakk cackled. "Excellent. We strike at moonset." When the moons dipped below the horizon, Fyrakk and 2 of his battalions took wing, flying by starlight. In the distance, heavy clouds hung low over the Obsidian Citadel, their bellies bright with the light reflected from Neltharion's forges. Tonight the Primalists would shatter the Aspect's western defenses. Iridikron would have Fyrakk to thank for it, too. Perhaps the Stone Scale would finally appreciate his strength and resourcefulness. Viranoth was too principled, too cautious. Only Fyrakk could unleash chaos over the Broodlands, leaving nothing but cinders in his wake. The Frozen Heart would destroy only those she could not subdue. In Fyrakk's mind, that hesitancy made her feeble. As they sailed closer, a war horn sounded in the night, a singular and lonely warning. Fyrakk grinned. Adrenaline punched through his veins, brilliant and hot. Magma sizzled between his teeth. Today he would make the black and red dragonflights bleed. They would watch their precious queen tumble from the skies before a new day dawned. He hadn't thought to take the enemy completely unawares. The Aspects had spies and scouts everywhere. No doubt the Incarnate and his battalions had been seen leaving their camps and flying north. Even so, the Earthen Bulwark would have to scramble to organize their forces. Fyrakk would feast on the chaos. A second warhorn blared out, closer this time. Fyrakk narrowed his eyes. The thought struck him almost a second too late. That's not a dragon bugle, that's a mortal hunting horn. A whistling shadow shot past Fyrakk's ear, colliding with the primal dragon on Fyrakk's left wing. The dragon gurgled around the splinters of wood lodged in his throat, then dropped lifeless. A second salvo hit one of Fyrakk's wing leaders, and a third dragon shrieked as a javelin pierced its wing. "Climb!" Fyrakk roared, stretching his wings and vaulting himself higher. His magma talons on the front line didn't react quickly enough. A dark volley of javelins screamed from the jungles below, shattering skulls, puncturing guts, and dousing the fiery wings of more than 50 dragons at once. Fury bubbled in Fyrakk's veins as the rest of his forces gained altitude. He would destroy these insects for their audacity. How dare they interfere with an incarnate's plans? "Burn the forest!" Fyrakk shouted into the skies. "Burn them all!" He dived, leading the charge, building up a powerful glut of fire in his chest. A third horn sounded, but the timbre of this one wasn't a warning, it was a challenge. Nearly 100 red dragons burst from the trees, armor gleaming, forms silhouetted against the silhouette's burning skies. At their head was Crystal Straws, flight leader of the Ruby Flamebringers, a powerful brute who had killed more primalists than Fyrakk had numbers for. Fyrakk's scouts had not informed him that Crystal Straws was positioned to the south too, but no matter. All would die in a primal flame. "Come then!" Fyrakk roared, answering the dragonflight's challenge with his own. With a powerful thrash of his wings, he sent twisting columns of fire toward his enemies. The Reds maneuvered around them undeterred and fell upon his magma talons. Fyrakk thought he spotted a glimpse of crimson and gold on the front line, but it winked out in a burst of cinders. "Alexstrasza," he thought. "Good. Now watch as I dismantle your flight limb by limb." Fyrakk had always taken to the business of killing with glee. He grabbed a red out of the sky and sank his teeth into the creature's unnaturally long neck. Its bones snapped under the pressure of his jaws. Dropping it, he darted forward and slammed into a pack of 5, shocking them with a burst of heat. Not even the dragon's armor and scales could reflect an incarnate's flames, and their delicate wing membranes caught fire. Their raw screams were a melody to Fyrakk's ears. The sweet scent of their charred flesh filled his nostrils. They tumbled toward the ground, snatched from the air by their comrades. Ruby light ensconced the fallen, healing their wounds. No matter. Fyrakk had the numbers. He would delight in tormenting them a second time. 2 large reds rushed at him. Grinning, Fyrakk leapt toward the first one and feinted left, dodging its first attack. The second red was on Fyrakk in an instant, hooking its front talons into the big muscle near his shoulder. Pain sparked through the incarnate's body, but he reveled in it. With one powerful twist of his back, Fyrakk flipped over, surprising the red. He seized the dragon in his powerful wings and yanked it against his torso. The red struggled, unable to break free. "That was a mistake," he said with a wild laugh. Together they plummeted through the air, slamming into a scrum of dragons below. Bones broke, skulls cracked, armor shattered. 9 dragons fell in a storm of thrashing wings and talons. Howls of pain and terror lit up the sky and set Fyrakk's heart aflame. He dug his powerful back talons into the red's abdomen and ripped, gutting it easily. Then Fyrakk kicked the red away, leaving his prey to break upon the rocks below. "The Broodlands will burn!" Fyrakk raged, opening his wings and beating them powerfully, shooting back up into the skies. He basked in the heat of the bloodshed. This was all Fyrakk wanted. This was what he lived for. The fight. His battlefield was chaos. The Blazing One cared little for strategy. He found Iridikron tedious and Viranoth dull. Instead, Fyrakk lost himself in the pulse of the battle, relishing the sight of every red dragon he struck from the sky. He dipped and twisted around his enemies, using hot air currents to send them into death spirals, superheating the dragon's armor and punching molten metal past their scales, setting all the skies alight. Perhaps the black dragonflight's armor was effective against a primal dragon, but Fyrakk tore through it as easily as he might a whelp scales. It was glorious. He hoped Alexstrasza watched the masterpiece of violence he was painting with her precious flight, sending dragon after dragon to their death. Unlike Viranoth, Fyrakk did not cower behind the lines of the dragons who followed him. No, he plunged into battle alongside his soldiers. His dragons took strength from Fyrakk's martial zeal. Together they were an unstoppable brute force, raining fire and chaos down upon their enemies. From the middle of the Ruby Flamebringers line, Crystal Straws trumpeted the retreat, falling back toward the citadel. "Will you run, then?" Fyrakk said, his laughter nipping at their tails. "Fine! Admit the elements are greater than your precious order!" Before he could finish, a battle shout echoed from behind Fyrakk's forces. The Incarnate turned in the air, hardly just surprised to see Neltharion's favorite little one-eyed wing leader, Lavarian, leading a battalion of black dragons against the Primalist rearguard. "Strike the magma talons from the sky," Laverian shouted to his battalion, "but leave the incarnate to me." "Ha!" Fyrakk shouted. "I should like to see you try, whelp!" Laverian tucked his wings against his body and dived toward the incarnate. With a grin, Fyrakk sucked a greedy breath into his lungs. The flames along his spine blazed brighter as he loosed a torrent of fire at the black wing leader. He had watched his breath melt the very scales off dragons' hides. Nothing could survive such heat. But Laverian burst through the flames untouched, his scales, wings, and armor glittering with arcane magic. Shocked, Fyrakk drew in a gasp, almost choking on his own breath. It burned in his gullet. The wing leader fell upon the incarnate, tearing away some of Fyrakk's magma-hardened scales. Pain oozed from the wounds. "You can't burn me, Fyrakk," the wing leader said, so softly that Fyrakk almost couldn't hear the words. "I can still tear out your throat," Fyrakk said with a roar. He twisted and tried to grab Laverian, but the wing leader was faster, propelling himself out of range of Fyrakk's wings and talons. As Laverian dodged Fyrakk's second attack, a blaze of crimson scales swooped in. The red dragon slashed one of the incarnate's wing membranes, then darted away in a blaze of sparks. The two dragons teamed up on Fyrakk, diving and ducking his attacks. Both Laverian and the red, Fyrakk thought he recognized Alexstrasza's favorite champion, Bajans, had heat-shielded scales and wings. They used quick, ruthless strikes, never letting Fyrakk get too close or land a blow. Furious, Fyrakk gathered his wings against his chest and then spread them wide, sending a localized explosion through the air. He knocked the dragons away, sending them careening toward the world below. With a growl, the incarnate hovered aloft, getting his bearings. He'd been so distracted by the aspect's little gnats, he hadn't realized that the black dragonflight had pushed his forces to the southern edge of the obsidian citadel. He vented a hot breath through his nostrils, ignoring the ember of trepidation that smoldered in his chest. Why had the earthen bulwark pushed the primalists closer to the citadel? Perhaps they thought they could win an advantage if they brought the primalists to the artillery on the citadel's walls? Bah, he could kill an entire battalion of Draconid in one breath. Fyrakk had only seen the citadel from a distance. The place was far larger than he'd imagined, sprawling across the westernmost edge of the Black Mountains and using the natural caldera beneath the rock to fuel its forges. Even from here, Fyrakk could sense the lava moving beneath the stone. Hundreds of dragons flew between Fyrakk and the citadel's walls. The obsidian guard took wing, rising over the ramparts, while the ruby flamebringers rallied behind them. 2 units of Malagus's spell scales took up the rear guard. Odd. None of the reports he'd heard had mentioned the blue dragonflight's presence at the citadel. No matter, even if Fyrakk had lost a third of his forces on the advance, the primalists still outnumbered Alexstrasza's forces. The obsidian guard charged. As black dragons slammed into Fyrakk's line, the incarnate surged forward on a wave of boiling air. It desiccated the guard's wing membranes, drawing the moisture from their flesh. The primals tore into the black dragons. With a roar, Fyrakk joined them, and in the blaze of battle, Fyrakk almost didn't see the stars twinkle and shift far overhead. Almost. A hammer of onyx reavers dropped through the skies. Fyrakk trumpeted twice, a warning. His primal dragons had seen this maneuver before at Wormrest Temple and Cinderfrost Vale, but it was a difficult formation to counter. The black dragons would hit their marks moving so fast that they could break the primal dragons' armored backs, knock them senseless, and smash their bodies against the ground. The attack was almost impossible to dodge, especially at night. Superheating the air beneath his wings, Fyrakk launched himself at the oncoming reavers. Relying on his upward momentum, he spiraled in the air to draw the heat around his body. Just before the reavers struck him, he whipped his wings open wide, creating a thermal explosion. The eruption rocked the black dragon, sending them tumbling through the air head over tail. Those who managed to keep their wings fled before the incarnate, but not fast enough. He fell upon 2 at once, tearing the wings from their backs and leaping toward a third. He did not hit his target. Another black dragon struck Fyrakk from behind, sinking its talons into his hide. Fyrakk blasted the fires along his spine brighter, catching the black dragon in the face. It roared in pain but held on. A second black dragon attacked from his right. Fyrakk rolled and dived to shake off his attackers, then banked back toward the primalist lines. The primalists still made forward progress, but the obsidian guard proved to be much more resilient than the reds. They were slower, but nearly impossible to kill thanks to the heavy armor and tight formations. The earthen bulwark kept pushing the primalists closer to the citadel, too, placing them within range of the Draconids' ballistae. Out of the corner of his eye, Fyrakk spotted another flash of vermilion scales and shimmering rubies. He turned, but the Dragon Queen disappeared into a shower of sparks. "Alexstrasza!" he roared at the Dragon Queen. "Craven! Meet me in battle, else I will slay every dragon in the waking shores!" But Alexstrasza was gone. With a growl, Fyrakk plunged back into the fray, killing anything and anyone who came within reach. Dragons fell from the skies, his, theirs. Screams cracked off the black mountains. Death filled his nostrils and rang in his ears. He saw a third flash of the Dragon Queen, then a fourth. She appeared on the front lines for just a moment, using her cleansing flames to heal the Obsidian Guard. Was Alexstrasza so cowardly as to refuse to meet him on the field of battle? If he could not stir the Dragon Queen to action by killing, perhaps he could threaten the very Obsidian Citadel itself. He wasn't far from its gates now, perhaps a few hundred wing lengths, no more. As he hovered over the smooth volcanic hillsides of the Black Mountains, he sensed the burning blood that flowed beneath the world's crust. It would not listen to Fyrakk the way it listened to Iridikron. The stone steel could manipulate molten rock as if it were mud or clay. Fyrakk couldn't force the lava to form mountains, but he could coax its quiet heart into violent volatility. Calling out his forces for support, Fyrakk began to channel the fires in the earth below. The primalists rallied around him, defending him as he drew upon the power of the elements. A tendril of fire twisted from the rock, reaching for the blazing one, sinuous and small. A second tongue of fire stretched forth, only to be joined by a third, a fourth, then a multitude. The flames twisted and writhed around the incarnate in the skies. They roared with the voices of 100 dragons, lighting up the lands for 50 wing lengths in every direction. Fyrakk gorged himself on the flames. The heat from the earth built up in his spine and lungs, augmenting his power. His flaming horns burned brighter. His wings burned blood red. Fyrakk roared, and the earth answered. Stone cracked and melted under the heat. Lava pools formed around the citadel, growing wider by the breath. Fyrakk was the element of fire unleashed. He reveled in it, in this brilliant burning promise of destruction and death. All his pain and exhaustion faded into the flames. Today, Alexstrasza the Lifebinder would fall, and the Broodlands would fall with her. In the distance, the black dragons trumpeted, frantic. Some dived toward the earth, perhaps to stop the citadel's foundations from melting in the heat that Fyrakk brought to bear. The other primal dragons fled from him too, as the air grew so hot it hissed against his scales. Fyrakk threw back his head and laughed. "Come, Alexstrasza," he said with a roar. "Fight me, or all that you have wrought shall burn." Through the swirling flames, Fyrakk saw a shimmer of ruby scales, but the Dragon Queen did not answer his challenge. Fine. He would blast a hole in the citadel's flank then. "The Queen!" one of the primalists shouted. Warning bugles erupted on the front lines. "It's the Dragon Queen!" A glint of gold caught his eye, plummeting through the skies overhead. Fyrakk glanced up. He saw a flash of talons first. He ducked, but not fast enough. Alexstrasza raked her talons across his snout, shattering his channel. The great inferno around him collapsed, fizzing into cinders on the wind. He snarled. She flipped in the air, kicking him under the jaw and sending bright sparks popping across his vision. His fangs nicked his tongue, filling his mouth with the taste of blood. With a husky chuckle, Alexstrasza folded her wings and plummeted toward the citadel's gates. "There you are, Alexstrasza!" Fyrakk roared, spitting blood. The primalists parted in terror as Fyrakk charged forward, swooping after the queen. She opened her wings before she hit the ground, flying fast for the citadel's walls. He couldn't let her get back across friendly lines. Bolts from the ballistae on the citadel's walls whistled past him. Fyrakk ducked beneath them, and with a mighty thrust of his wings, he leapt at the Dragon Queen. He feinted left, but sprang right. He caught Alexstrasza in a dodge, jaws snapping at her armored neck. He could crush her throat in a single bite. He missed. Alexstrasza growled, a low reverb that caught him in the gut. She swung her head around, bludgeoning him in the cheek and eye socket. Pain exploded through the hinge of his jaw. Her horns slashed through his hide. With a massive sweep of her wings, she kicked him back. "A decent hit," Fyrakk said with a hiss. The two dragons spiraled around each other. The warm air currents lifted Fyrakk faster, higher. "But you'll have to do better than that to defeat me." Do you think you can win, Dragon Queen? Against you? Obviously, she said, but the timbre of her voice sounded different. Deeper, almost. Fyrakk hadn't noticed a change in her voice at the parley. Let's see if you remember what I taught you. How to fight like a real dragon. Fyrakk snapped his wings forward, setting the air between them aflame. He dived through the fire, taking Alexstrasza by surprise and slamming into her left flank. He tore off a panel of her chest armor with his talons, leaving light scores in her shoulder muscles. The scent of blood hit Fyrakk's snout. A faint flash of bluish light sparkled along her scales. Another shield, Fyrakk wondered, flaring his nostrils. Alexstrasza flipped over in the air, sinking her talons into Fyrakk's belly. The incarnate howled in pain, struggling to keep them both aloft and scrabbling at her chest with his forelimbs. There's only one problem, Fyrakk, the Dragon Queen said, her voice growing rougher, deeper. She tugged him closer. A flash of purple fire burst from her golden eyes. I am not Alexstrasza, Fyrakk gasped. Malygos! The aspect grinned, folding his wings and diving backward, dragging Fyrakk with him. As they plummeted through the skies, the red color wicked off Malygos' scales, revealing their true azure gleam. Fyrakk thrashed in Malygos' grip, but the blue aspect held him firm. With a roar, he sent out a broiling burst of heat, but the blue aspect dragged him down in a blaze of fire. With a sweep of his wings, Malygos opened an enormous, shimmering portal below them. Fyrakk shrieked in rage, kicking, biting, slashing, falling. They hit the portal's surface and tumbled through it. Cold shocked Fyrakk's senses, dousing his bright flames. For a single heartbeat, he went numb, surrounded by silence. Just before he started to panic, the world roared back. Fyrakk collided with solid ground, tumbling head over tail until he scraped to a stop. Not my most elegant portal exit, a voice said through a haze, but it is rather difficult when your cargo is trying to kill you. Fyrakk scrambled to his feet, catching himself on one wing as his legs gave out on him. He rested on a round platform in a darkened cavern. Pale light filtered through the room. Nosdormu, Ysera, and Malygos stood on the platform before him, just out of range of attack. The aspects regarded him with curious expressions. Behind them, 3 massive Titan-made machines reached down from the ceiling. Each machine clutched an enormous glowing orb in its claws. In the shadows, the Incarnate thought he could see the Titan Forge staring at him, but the world swam before his eyes. He could barely make out other platforms and ledges in the room, but what they were used for, Fyrakk could not guess. Welcome to the Vault of the Incarnates, Fyrakk, Nosdormu said in a measured tone. You're just in time. What's this? Fyrakk said, trying to step forward. A wave of vertigo hit him, sending him sprawling to the ground. For several seconds he couldn't tell what direction was up. He winced. What did you do to me? I remember my first portal, Malygos said with a chuckle. It takes the body a few hours to adjust to the disorientation. But the effects are not permanent, usually. I will kill you for this, Fyrakk said. Malygos! No, dear cousin, Ysera said as she stepped forward. You will sleep a deep, dreamless sleep. Forgive me when I say, I hope we never meet again. Fyrakk scrambled to sit up. Ysera! Wait! The dreamer drew a deep breath, then exhaled a green cloud that smelled of sweet summer grass and wildflowers. Fyrakk tried to back away, but it descended upon him like a thick fog, sneaking into his nostrils and filling his lungs. In 3 breaths, his eyelids began to droop. Goodbye, Fyrakk, Nosdormu said, as golden sands danced across the Incarnate's sight. This is where your time ends. Vyranoth! The voice tore the frozen heart from sleep. She lifted her head, a bolt of fear zinged through her body and jolted her awake. The Incarnate slept inside the great glacier, encouraging it to grow and expand as she slept. Even if it took her 100 years, she would cover all the reach in ice and lay Neltharion's mountains low. She would see Raszageth freed, and once the Storm Eater rejoined her in the skies, they would hold Alexstrasza to account for her crimes against dragonkind. Vyranoth! The voice said, echoing through the icy halls. This time she recognized it as Raszvik's. There is news from the south! I'm here, Vyranoth said, emerging from one of the many caverns inside the glacier. Raszvik hurried down the corridor toward her, panting, so panicked that he stumbled and slid on the ice. It is unlike you to be so careless, Vyranoth said, helping him up from the floor with a wing talon. What is wrong? There was a battle, he said, gasping, over the obsidian citadel. Fyrakk. The aspects have captured Fyrakk. Viranoth drew a sharp breath, stepping back from Razvik as if the news had burned her. A tremor raced through her jaw. She clamped her mouth shut, unwilling to show any emotion or reaction. No, she thought. No, the Dragon Queen can't take another one from us. Let the skies. Fyrakk, you fool, what have you done? Did I not warn you of the dangers? Would the aspects lock Fyrakk away in a prison of stone too? Deprive him of the skies, of the very air that fed the great fires of his heart? Viranoth had never been close to the blazing one. They were as opposite as the very elements they embodied, but his loss cut her to the quick, dredging up the feelings she had experienced after Razagath's loss. The glacier groaned and cracked, expanding as it fed on her fury. The floor trembled, and the temperature grew so cold that even Razvik trembled. Long ago, Alexstrasza had turned her tail on Viranoth. Now did she think the frozen heart would stand by while her flight stole everything the Incarnate held dear? No, no. Viranoth would call an age of ice down upon the Broodlands, waging a ceaseless war until her comrades were freed. It had taken Viranoth centuries to find her place in this new world. She would not allow the Dragon Queen to take it from her now, not after all the cracks Alexstrasza had already put in her heart. Viranoth, he asked, voice tremulous. Do you know what happened? Viranoth asked quietly. I have reports from the survivors. Good, Viranoth said, stalking past him. We fly for Harrow's Deep at once. Alright, so my gut says they'll capture Viranoth next, and then Iridikron. But it could go the other way. So, narrative-wise, Viranoth might be pissed now and a little bit more reckless, and therefore get captured. And then you could see Iridikron kind of trying to just bulwark himself in, hunker down, but being outnumbered once they can turn all of their forces at him and getting him eventually. Or conversely, you could see a scenario where they get Iridikron, and then there is a kind of a sad moral finale when they capture Viranoth. But I'm less inclined to think it's that way. My first scenario is what I feel in my bones. Whew, all right, guys. There's a lot of... the pollen count's insane right now. So I appreciate you bearing with me for my voice. And I know sometimes I probably make you have to turn your earbuds down, your volume down or whatever. And, bearing with the voices. I only have so many dragon voices in my repertoire, so... and I know they're not professional grade, but I do appreciate it. I hope you guys like it. And thank you for tuning in to this episode of Lore of Warcraft. Episode Pipe 5x5. See you next time.